Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This is Demoniacal Justinian by Procopius, and it's your monster of the month. Procopius was a senator during the reign of Emperor Justinian, and his writings are the core primary source for when we're studying him. He was the legal advisor to Belisarius, Constantinople's most skilled general, and wrote about his military campaigns, most of which he attended. In secret, Procopius also wrote a second history, parodying how tacky the emperor, his general, and their two wives were. Procopius was from Caesarea, and thought Justinian's family were rustic upstarts. One of his more interesting claims is that Justinian had been replaced by a demon. In Ars Magica, this seems difficult to understand, because emperors, regardless of their personal morality, have magic resistance granted to them at their coronation. Nonetheless, here's Procopius's description, as read by Public Domain Scholar, thanks to them and their LibriVox production team. Stats on the blog.
Chapter 12 of the Secret History of the Court of Justinian by Procopius. Recording by Public Domain Scholar. Those who were considered the wealthiest persons in Byzantium and other cities of the empire, next after the members of the Senate, were robbed of their wealth by Justinian and Theodora in the manner which I have described above. I shall now describe how they managed to take away all the property of the members of the Senate. There was at Constantinople one Zeno, grandson of that Anthemius, who formerly had been emperor of the West. They sent this man to Egypt as governor. He delayed his departure while he loaded his ship with precious valuables, for he had silver beyond any man's counting, and gold plate set with pearls and emeralds, and with other like precious stones. But Justinian and Theodora bribed some of those who passed for his most faithful servants to take everything out of the ship as fast as they could, set it on fire in the hold, and then go and tell Zeno that his ship had taken fire of its own accord, and that all his property was lost. Some time after this, Zeno died suddenly, and they took possession of his property as his heirs, producing a well which, it is currently reported, was never made by him. In like manner, they made themselves the heirs of Tatian, of Demosthenes, and of Hilera, persons who at the time held the first rank in the Roman Senate. They obtained other persons' fortunes by the production, not of formal wills, but of counterfeit conveyances. This was how they became the heirs of Dionysius, who dwelt in Labanus, and of John the son of Basil, who was the leading man in Edessa, and had been delivered up to the Persians and hostage against his will by Belisarius, as I have told already. Carausius kept this John a prisoner and refused to let him go, declaring that the Romans had not performed all the terms of the treaty for which John had been given in pledge by Belisarius, but he was prepared to let him be ransomed as a prisoner of war. His grandmother, who was still alive, got together the money for his ransom, not less than 2,000 pounds of silver, and would have ransomed her grandson. But when this money arrived at Dara, the emperor heard of the transaction and forbade it, that the wealth of Romans might not be conveyed to barbarians. Not long after this John fell ill and died, whereupon the governor of the city forged a letter, which he said John had written to him, as a friend not long before, to the effect that he desired the emperor to succeed to his property. I could not give the list of all other people, whose heirs Justinian and Theodora became by the free will of the testators. However, up to the time of the insurrection called Nika, they only plundered rich men of their property one by one. But when this broke out, as I have described in my former works, they then sequestered nearly all of the property of the Senate. They laid their hands upon all the movables and the finest parts of the estates, but set apart such lands as were burdened with grievous imposts, and, under the pretense of kindness, restored them to their former possessors. So these people, oppressed by the tax-gatherers, and tormented by the never-ceasing interest to be paid upon their debts, became weary of their lives. For the reasons which I have stated, I, and many of my position, never believed that they were really two human beings, but evil demons, and what the poets call scourges of mankind, who laid their heads together to see how they could fastest and most easily destroy the race and the works of man, but who had assumed human forms, and became something between men and demons, and thus convulsed the whole world. One can find proofs of this theory more particularly in the superhuman power with which they acted. There is a wide distinction between the human and the supernatural. Many men have been born, in every age who, either by circumstances or their own character, have shown themselves terrible beings, who became the ruins of cities, countries, and whatever else fell into their hands. But to destroy all men, and to ruin the whole earth has been granted to none save these two, who have been helped by fortune in their schemes to destroy the whole human race. For about this time, much ruin was caused by earthquakes, pestilences, and inundations of rivers, as I shall immediately tell you. Thus it was not by mere human power, but by something greater, that they were enabled to work their evil will. It is said that Justinian's mother told some of her intimates that Justinian was not the son of Sabatius, her husband, or of any human being, but that, at the time when she became pregnant, an unseen demon accompanied with her, whom she only felt as when a man has connection with a woman, and who then vanished away as in a dream. Some who have been in Justinian's company, in the palace very late at night, men with a clear conscience, have thought that in his place they have beheld a strange and devilish form. One of them said that Justinian suddenly arose from his royal throne and walked about, although indeed he could never sit still for long, and that at that moment his head disappeared, while the rest of his body still seemed to move to and fro. The man who beheld this stood trembling and troubled in mind, not knowing how to believe his eyes. Afterwards, the head joined the body again, and united itself to the parts from which it had so strangely been severed. Another declared that he stood beside Justinian as he sat, and of a sudden his face turned into a shapeless mass of flesh, without either eyebrows or eyes in their proper places, or anything else which makes a man recognizable. But after a while he saw the form of his face come back again. What I write here I did not see myself, but I heard it told by men who were positive that they had seen it. They say too that a certain monk, highly in favor with God, was sent to Byzantium by those who dwelt with him in the desert, to beg that favor might be shown to their neighbors, who had been wronged and outraged beyond endurance. When he arrived at Byzantium, he straightway obtained an audience of the emperor, but just as he was about to enter his apartment, he started back, and turning round suddenly withdrew. The eunuch who was escorting him, and also the bystanders, besought him earnestly to go forward, but he made no answer, but like one who has had a stroke of the palsy, made his way back to his lodging. When those who had come with him asked why he acted thus, they say that he distinctly stated that he saw the chief of the devils sitting on his throne in the midst of the palace, and he would not meet him or ask anything of him. How can one believe this man to have been anything but an evil demon, who never took his fill of drink, food, or sleep, but snatched at the meals which were set before him anyhow, and roamed about the palace at untimely hours of the night, and yet was so passionately addicted to venery? Some of Theodora's lovers, when she was still on the stage, declared that a demon had fallen upon them, and driven them out of her bedchamber, that it might pass the night with her. There was a dancer named Macedonia, who belonged to the blue faction of Antioch, and who had very great influence with Justinian. This woman used to write letters to him while Justin was still on the throne, and thus easily made away with any great man in the East whom she chose, and caused their property to be confiscated for the public use. And they say that this Macedonia once greeted Theodora, when she saw her very much troubled and cast down at the ill treatment which she had received at the hands of Hesebolius, and at the loss of her money on her journey, and encouraged and cheered her, bidding her remember the fickleness of fortune, which might again grant her great possessions. They say that Theodora used to tell how, that night, she had a dream which bade her take no thought about money, for that when she came to Byzantium, she would share the bed of the chief of the demons, that she must manage by all means to become his wedded wife, and that afterwards she would have all the wealth of the world at her disposal. This was the common report in regard to these matters. End of chapter 12 of the Secret History of the Court of Justinian.
Your saga may vary.